welcome to episode 35 of the Ecuador Insider Podcast. I am Jesse Bayer, joined today by a guest. Darnell is not joining us on today's show. Today is Friday, July 14th, 2017. I am here in our offices in Loja, Ecuador. I'll introduce our guest momentarily, who's in the States. Actually super excited to get him on the line. We've been trying to hook up for quite a while now. He is an expert in shipping, in freight shipping. So we'll get to that momentarily. Once again, we are Abundant Living Ecuador. You can find us on our website at abecuador.com. From the States and Canada, you can reach us at 888-999-0948. Email is info@abecuador.com. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Again, psyched for this show. We're going to focus on shipping to Ecuador. Definitely a topic that people, want to know about who are coming here. It is kind of a pain to do, and we have, an excellent expert to help us understand a little bit more about that. So, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm glad we finally got a chance to find a schedule that works for both of us.
My pleasure.
So again, Stephen Aaron is a shipping agent, or he runs a company. You can find his company on ifeonline.info and check out that freight company. And Stephen has been shipping to Ecuador for 5 years. Has a really interesting life. I think, Stephen, honestly, you will explain it better than I will. So why don't we just start there? Why don't you just give our listeners a little bit of background about, who you are and, how you got to this point, and then we can kind of jump into some of the specifics.
Sure. I was actually born in Basra, Iraq in 1948. My parents moved to Kuwait when I was 5 years old, and I basically grew up in Kuwait. I was sent to British boarding schools from the age of 7 until I was 18 when my parents returned to Europe, and I started work in London. From there, I decided I didn't really like the British weather, and I emigrated to Canada. And then my company moved me to Belgium because I was a European. And I ended up actually moving across the Atlantic 7 times, which is why I feel very passionate about helping people move now. Having had some very good moving companies and some very bad moving companies, sometimes the company paying for it, sometimes me paying for it. I feel there's a lot of information I have that can help other people avoid all the pitfalls.
Yeah, and you sort of, I know from just knowing you a little bit, you've kind of gotten into this work really to help people, as opposed to much of a money maker for you. I'm sure you make some money on it, but you've been sort of a high flying executive, and you're kind of doing this now more so from the perspective of helping people, get their stuff places successfully. Is that accurate?
Yeah. No, I used to run shipping companies. I got into the shipping business actually before the start of containers. I ran the first container vessels across the North Atlantic. They were actually 350 20-foot containers. And then we grew up to 500 20-foot containers. That was in the early 70s. Nowadays the ships are taking more than 20,000 containers. So the business has grown quite a bit. But yes, I spent my whole life running shipping companies, and it's actually my wife, when we returned to the States in the late 90s, she'd been having a good life traveling around with me and not doing too much work, so her resume wasn't exactly up to finding a job in the States. And she set up a freight company, and it really started as a sort of sideline, but she was so good at it, it turned into a worthwhile freight business to the point where she was able to give me a job. Uh, but it's as people who work with their wives or partners know, it's not an easy thing to spend basically 24/7 with somebody.
I can attest to that from personal and current experience.
Yeah. Well, it was joining my wife's business was a wake up for me because I'd had a couple of secretaries and didn't really use the computer, and we got on fine once I realized and accepted she was the boss and I didn't have a secretary, and I went from high flying executive down to gopher doing everything for myself. So,
Wow, that must have been a challenge to accept that at this point in your career.
yeah, but fun. You know, I went from knowing nothing about computers to having to fix everything on a computer. So I'm reasonably computer literate, and
Right.
as you gather from 1948, I'm actually past retirement age, but I really enjoy what I do. So I don't see any need to stop doing it until my brain gives out and I can't do the work I need to do and start forgetting things. But
Yeah.
right now, I really enjoy it. So.
Well, that's excellent. I mean, there's nothing better than enjoying what you do. It's funny. I have, I work here with my significant other as well, which is always a challenge. But it's funny too. You bring up. It's very interesting because I am. I've also worked I've worked at all levels, in my life from the bottom to the boss. And it's funny. I never really thought about that, but it's very true. When you're not the boss, you really get very good at a lot of things that you completely don't know anything about when you are the boss.
Yes, well, and you can do it all yourself, and you don't have anybody else to worry about. When you're the boss, you're worrying about all the people that work for you, and
Right.
all the shareholders and banks and everybody above you. When you're just doing a job because it's a fun job to do, there's nobody you're reporting to, or so it's a very relaxing time as well.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, before we jump into sort of some of the Ecuador specifics, when the freight companies that you ran prior to this, were those companies you started, or was those companies that hired you sort of in an executive role to oversee them?
No, I grew with the companies. I mean, containerization came out of nowhere, really. The very first company to run containers across the Atlantic was a company called Manchester Liners, and they operated out of the port of Manchester.
Mm-hmm.
And they were swallowed up by other companies, and as they were swallowed up, I moved to another company where they were just starting with containers. So, no, I didn't start the companies. I just grew with them. I went from selling to sales management to general management to at the end I was COO of Europe for one of the companies. So,
Mm-hmm.
But no, container shipping is a money business. The vessels cost
Sure.
depending on the size, but they're $20,000 to $35,000 a day, whether they're sitting or moving. So.
Right.
These fleets of 100 vessels, you can just imagine the money and investment you need to own a shipping company. So
Sure. And now you guys focus. You were telling me off air mostly on shipping airplanes. Is that correct?
yes. Florida has a huge second-hand used aircraft market, and actually, aircraft is America's #1 export, thanks to companies like Boeing and Cessna and a whole bunch more of American companies. But yeah, so second-hand aircraft in Florida are being shipped all over the world, and we've grown by reputation. We started very small, but now I would say we're the largest company moving aircraft, and people come to us when they've got specific problems on aircraft. Like I had Airbus company because they had a big plane stuck down in Asunción, Paraguay,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't find anybody to get it moving for them. It was too big for a container.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I came up with a way to get it out of Paraguay on a barge down the river and first to Europe and then to Norfolk, Virginia, and then trucked across the states to Mobile where they wanted it. And so people know our expertise on aircraft and come to us when they've got specific problems. But yes, we're shipping 3 or 4 container loads a week of aircraft to different places in the world.
Mm-hmm. And then, as far as obviously, you've shipped all over the world for, a lengthy career. So, obviously you have amazing experience in this industry. But as far as Ecuador specifically, you mentioned that around 5 years ago you started shipping to Ecuador. Let's obviously, our listeners mostly are focused on Ecuador, although some of them certainly could be interested in other places. But, let's sort of dive into some of the specifics there a little bit. I'll sort of leave it in your hands as far as how you want to approach that, but certainly I know the things that people are interested in. And by the way, Stephen wrote a blog for us that you can find on our website. Excellent blog that really gets into the nitty-gritty about shipping containers to Ecuador. I know the majority, Stephen, of your experience, I think, as well as from shipping from the States, although I think at least to Ecuador, I mean. But I think you're aware of obviously how that works from other places as well, given your background. So let's just jump into a little bit. People definitely would be interested in costs, obviously, some of the protocols, some of the pitfalls. But I'll sort of leave it in your hands, as to how you want to start.
Yeah, sure. Just starting though, we have shipped quite a few people from places like Taiwan and Europe and India, and interestingly, we ship people from Ecuador, not only back to the States, but we've shipped them to Mexico, and we've talked to them about other places. So
great.
We've handled exports, people wanting to leave Ecuador and go somewhere else. That's something we handle as well. I think where to start is the big question to me always when people say I need a rate to Ecuador is what are you planning on shipping and when are you planning on shipping it? The nice thing about Ecuador is you don't have to ship right away. A lot of people get caught up in this thing. Once they have their visa and cedula, they need to ship. Generally, when you move from A to B, the first thing you want to do is ship all your things with you. But Ecuador's very different because, to me, they have this fantastic deal that you can ship brand new items so long as they're for your personal use. You can also ship up to $35,000 worth of items to start a small business. So I think if I was moving to Ecuador, and my recommendation to people is not to rush to ship, but to go to Ecuador with what you carry on the plane with you, and then review what it is you really want to do there. Especially if you're buying a property and building a house. There's a lot of opportunity to take in things for the house. I've shipped, generators for houses, windmills, windows, doors. It's really down to doing your homework about why you want to ship and what you want to ship. And although it's a duty-free shipment, they do hit you up with a lot of charges and fees when the container gets to Ecuador. So as a very round number from the United States into your destination in Ecuador, you're looking at around $10,000.
And that's door to door, correct?
That's door to door. And the other thing that always surprises people is a 20-foot container, which is 1,172 cubic feet, is only a few $100 cheaper than a 40-foot container, what we call a high cube, which is 2,669 cubic feet, more than double. So, from somewhere in the middle of America to, say, Cuenca, you're looking at maybe 10,000 for a 20 foot and 10,500 for a 40 foot. It's literally a few $100 difference between the two. So again, the emphasis to me is on shop till you drop and load up everything you can because you're allowed new items.
Right.
And, take your time doing it and make sure you're buying everything you want to buy.
Yeah, and
Ecuador has beautiful things. So, things like doors to me, I saw amazing door, but, everybody's taste is different. So
sure.
Once you spend some time there and you're contemplating everything, you can decide what you want to buy and ship.
Sure. And Stephen, as I believe you explained to me before, as long as you've been outside the country of Ecuador within the last 6 months, is that correct? You can pick up your container even if it's a number of years after you've moved to the country. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yes. There's this misconception, and a lot of the people who are in this business shipping to Ecuador are confused by it. But it is simply within 6 months of the container must arrive within the last 6 months of your last entry into Ecuador. So literally, if you crossed into Peru and came back, so long as it was for a long weekend, we had a couple of cases of that where the people weren't well enough to travel further. That's stretching the law a little bit, and I don't recommend it. I prefer that people go back to their country of origin, see their container loaded, and then come back to Ecuador, and then you've got 6 months to get the container in.
Sure. So
they're actually allowed 2 containers if you really want to do your shopping.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's new for me. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, they've got to arrive at the same time. So
okay. And we'll get into some of the pitfalls and some of the protocol, but just as far as some of these, I just kind of want to set it up for people if somebody's thinking about do I ship a container or not. The reason really, as I see it, to ship a container to Ecuador, and obviously I'm talking basically from an economic standpoint, just cost. The reason to ship it is because of the import taxes in Ecuador. So if you can justify, if you're shipping a high enough dollar amount that to replace that stuff in Ecuador would cost you more than what you're bringing in plus your container fees, then it's worth it. And if not, then it's not. Now, obviously, we can get into sentimental value, and some people just want to bring their stuff, and they're willing to pay for it. That's different. But just looking at it from a financial standpoint, that's sort of how I see it. And that's kind of interesting because some of the import taxes have gone down recently, and so some stuff that were before were like astronomical to buy here and really cheap to buy, in a place like the U.S. are actually a little cheaper now. So that sort of ratio has changed a little bit recently. But is that sort of how you look at it as well, or what do you sort of give it? What kind of advice do you give people as to whether or not to ship?
Yeah, you hit on one, sentimental value. If it's valuable to you, or it's sentimentally valuable to you, or you cannot get it where you're going, those are the only things you really should take with you. Or, like you say, with Ecuador, because you can take new things, if it's of worthwhile value to buy it somewhere where you are in your origin, and it's cheaper there than in Ecuador, that's the other reason. But a lot of people moving, I think, shouldn't be paying $10,000 to take things with them.
Right.
And again, that's why you want to go to Ecuador first, settle in, decide if you're renting or buying and what you're doing with your life, and then decide if you want to take advantage of this duty-free import.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, and especially, also deciding if you're going to stay there or not, because, a lot of people come to Ecuador or anywhere else, and they live there for a while and then realize it's not where they want to be. So, better to have not shipped, all your stuff to wherever you're at, when you decide that. So,
yes, I've got one customer I've shipped 4 times now.
Right, there you go. Sure. Just a very funny, a very brief, side note. I think a lot of people come to Ecuador kind of thinking, it'll solve their problems. And then when their problems follow them, they say, I'm going somewhere else. So you get sort of some of that, some people kind of just transitioning in and out of here or anywhere else, I think that, expats go to.
Yes, well, a lot of people, like you say, they move for the wrong reasons. And again, I'm always amazed. Some of these people that ask me to ship them, they haven't even spent more than a couple of weeks in Ecuador before making the decision. And I think it's such a big decision. You need to spend the full 6 months there before you make that huge leap.
Right. So basically, it sounds in an ideal world for you as somebody who cares about people and is in this business and wants to see good outcomes. If someone's going to hire you, it's somebody who they're sure about Ecuador. They're bringing a lot of stuff, a lot of value. Whether that's stuff to start a business or whether that's a house full of things, or whether that's equipment that costs a lot and that would be very hard and very expensive to get here. But somebody in that situation is it sounds like maybe your ideal candidate to help ship here. Is that correct? Is that accurate? Okay, so we had a technical glitch there for a minute, Stephen. We had the line drop, so we're back together. I was just basically saying it sounds like the ideal sort of candidate to ship to Ecuador is someone who is sure they want to live here and has really a high value of things that they're bringing, whether that's to start a business or just to live, but enough to justify the trip. Is that sort of how you look at it?
Yes, no, very much so. And I try and discourage people that I don't see that quality. That they have to know what they want to ship. It's not a regular move where you pack up your house and take everything with you to your new destination.
Sure.
The other thing, maybe talking out of turn a bit, is the temperament of some of the people I move. It's a very different environment in Ecuador, and if you don't stay relaxed about the move, I can almost predict who's not going to last there very long, because some people get very worked up. I mean, it's a tense thing moving your life to a different location.
Right.
But if you're moving to Ecuador, you need to be able to stay calm and relaxed, and it's such a nice place to go and be able to relax, and everybody around you is relaxed. And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be moving there.
I'm really glad you brought that up. That's something we talk about from time to time. I think there may be a blog or two out there that we've written about that particular subject. And I would venture to guess that you're absolutely accurate in your statement that whether somebody gets super stressed out and upset during their move can predict whether they're going to stay in Ecuador or not. That would not surprise me at all if that was accurate. I've certainly seen, as somebody who helps a lot of people, who are coming to live here in one capacity or another, that really the success, I think, is hinged on basically two things, which is, are they willing to learn the language and integrate, and are they going to get upset that things are different than what they're used to? And if the answer to those two things is that people are fine with those differences and they're happy to sort of learn a new culture and new language, they're usually very happy here. And if they're not, they're usually not. And that's sort of as I've seen it. And I would imagine that could certainly play out the same way as far as getting stressed during the shipping process, etc.
Yes, no, if they're stressed during the shipping process, and especially the customs clearance in Guayaquil, which is not an easy thing to go through, you are not going to be able to survive. You've got to be able to relax and enjoy life and take it one day at a time, and things move slower. But that's what you're going for in Ecuador, is to go slower and enjoy your life, I think.
Exactly. Okay, so then so I'm a customer and I'm ready. I'm sure about Ecuador. I've got my place. I'm set up. I've done all my shopping. I'm all ready. I want to do the container. I'm somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 grand. I assume that's a little cheaper if you're, say, close to Florida, and a little more expensive if you're, say, in Montana. Is that accurate?
Yes, there's a lot of people. We move out of Texas, and Texas is probably 7 to 8 thousand, depending on where you are in Texas, to most places in Ecuador. So,
Okay, and are you shipping? Where do things leave from usually? Is it the West Coast or the East Coast?
we ship from just about every state and just about every port in.
Okay, so it doesn't matter,
No,
okay, and so Texas though is cheaper, and that's why. That's because you can get to a port faster, or how does that work?
yes, Houston is a major port for shipping to South America.
Got
Houston
it.
and Miami are the two main ports for South America.
Got
I did include Los Angeles, but Los Angeles is I tell people don't ship through that port, even if they're somewhere like Arizona.
it. Mm-hmm.
You're better off bringing the container down to Houston or even up to Oakland than you are taking it to LA.
Okay.
Uh,
And
LA,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, no, LA's a rip-off because they stop all the export containers. They have third-party warehouses, and they will charge to inspect the container roughly $3,000.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So, and they inspect a lot of containers. They're opening more and more of these third-party warehouses, and of course that means customs can inspect more containers.
Yeah.
The excuse they give is they're looking for the money going back to the drugs, but quite frankly, ports like Houston would be the same, but they're not doing those kinds of inspections.
Yeah. Without venturing into politics too deeply, California's got a lot of those kinds of problems.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm ready to go. And then I've hired you, and you're gonna help me through the process. Tell me how that goes. What am I doing? How does it work? What's the time frames? Obviously, costs we've talked about. Give me a sense of that process.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I explain to people is they've got to do their own packing.
Mm-hmm.
You can hire professional movers to do the packing, but the detail that Ecuador requires is such that you're paying the professional packers by the hour, and they're just, first of all, they're not used to doing the kind of detail required by Ecuador, but even if you can train them to list everything in the carton they're loading, it's a time thing, so you're paying a lot of money to have professional people list everything out for you. So I recommend that people at least pack all the small stuff themselves. When you get into the big items like the furniture and the beds and appliances, then having professionals pad wrap them for you is okay. But even that, you can save yourself a lot of money doing it yourself because it's not that difficult to do. Mm-hmm. I do recommend people get labor to load the container because that's literally back-breaking work, and that does require some organization in terms of making sure things are packed so that they don't get damaged. Again, there's a misconception that there's a special way to pack a container and only professionals can do it. It's really common sense. Heavy things on the bottom, light things on the top. Mm-hmm. Don't have things that poke into other things that are likely to break.
Sure.
We had a television arrive recently that was packed by professionals that something had gone right through the screen. So, mm-hmm. That's really just poor packing. Mm-hmm. There's no reason. I mean, people assume that the container is going to be thrown around on the high seas. In fact, moving to Ecuador, you're basically on a coastal voyage. You're going down the coast and, at worst, through the Panama Canal if you're coming from the east coast of the States. Mm-hmm. And then down the coast of South America. So you're not crossing any major oceans. So the containers are not thrown all over the place. Mm-hmm. It's biggest mistake people make packing cartons and packing containers is packing things too tight. It's actually the friction of things rubbing against each other and pushing against each other that causes the breakage. not banging into each other. So
Interesting. And Ecuador, you were mentioning that it's very specific the way you need to pack in Ecuador, and that involves like a packing list, basically, correct? Of like, but a very detailed one. Is that
I give people a sample packing list, but yeah, basically you can't say a carton of cutlery. You have to say 6 knives, 6 forks, 6 spoons, and you have to put a value for each knife, fork, and spoon, a total for all the knives, forks, and spoons, and then a total for the carton. So,
okay. Oh, wow.
And you indicate whether it's new or used.
Okay. And then if you do that wrong, the risk is you get held up in customs, basically, correct?
Yes, they will make you do another inspection. You get the opportunity. I've had that happen where people have ignored it and not done it correctly. And in Guayaquil, they open up every single carton, or 99% of them, and they check that you have everything listed.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started doing it, 5 years ago, they would confiscate things you hadn't listed. Now they make you redo your list.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you have everything unloaded and you list it all out, and then they put it all back in the container. And then you go back for another inspection a week later. And while all that is going on, it's costing you $100 a day for the container to sit.
So you don't want to mess that up. How many days do you have before you start getting charged at the port?
The different lines have different days, but generally it's around 8 to 10 days most of the carriers give you.
Mm-hmm.
And you use every single one of those days by the time you've done all the paperwork. When the vessel arrives in Guayaquil, you submit all your paperwork notarized to customs, and you request a inspection. And they will generally give you an inspection 3 or 4 days later. And then after the physical inspection, they do a paperwork inspection. It goes to another person in an office. In the physical inspection, they've taken pictures of every carton they've opened up. So the person in the office looks at the pictures and looks at the list, goes through it all again. And then after that second inspection and customs releases it, then you go through all the port releases, which again take several days. So it's a very, I said earlier, it's a very difficult experience going through the clearance in Guayaquil.
And if someone hires you, how does that work? Do you have like an agent that's helping with that in Guayaquil, or is the client there working on that, or how does that work?
Yes, I have a lovely lady. She's actually an American who's married to an Ecuadorian, but we laugh because she's more like an Ecuadorian than an American nowadays. She forgot it was 4th of July this year. She sent me an email with questions and went back and said it's the 4th.
That happened to me this year as well.
Yeah. But it really works because she's an American, so she does understand the culture and everything and what we're trying to do, and she obviously knows Ecuador very well and knows the customs guys really well and knows the good ones that can laugh and the ones that aren't so into being humorous, and she's very good. But yes, you need somebody. I'm not just promoting my company. I think it's very important that you are. Whoever ships you, you've got to be comfortable with the person that's going to take you through the process in Guayaquil. So I would recommend, that people interview the representative of whoever they're deciding to ship with, and make sure they're comfortable that person is somebody they want beside them as they go through this schooling process.
And what, in your experience, what percentage of the time, ballpark, can you get that container through customs in the allotted time before that $100 daily charge? Is that 50-50? Is that 80? What kind of percentage would you put on that?
It used to be very seldom you'd go over the free time. What's happened is people have taken advantage of the rules and customs are much more leery now about what you're bringing in and if you're bringing it in for yourself or somebody else. And again, with diverting a little, I would recommend you lose friends rather than bring things in for people, because when you're standing in Guayaquil and they open up a box and you don't know exactly what it is, that's a huge black mark in terms of, the customs. They're not stupid. They've done it for years and they know what's what. And so nowadays it's really rare to actually do it within the free time. It's got to be one of those perfect storms. You've got to have a perfect list. You've got to have a nice customs person, and you'll usually run over 1 or 2 days, depending on the vessels. Usually get in on a Sunday, so you can't submit your paperwork till the Monday. You'll probably get your physical inspection by Thursday or Friday. Sometimes they don't even give that till the following Monday. And if that's the case, you're doomed for getting it out in time. But again, looking at the $10,000 bill, it's part of what you're going to expect.
Okay.
You shouldn't be down to your last couple of $100, but yeah, it can easily run another couple of $100 in the process.
Okay, and you mentioned the inspection. So the person who's receiving the container, they're actually physically present for the inspection.
Yeah, you don't have to go. You can give the person representing you a power of attorney. I insist people go. I think it's very silly not to go. Firstly, because you can be there to explain exactly what you're bringing in and why you're bringing it in, and demonstrated it is for your personal use.
Right.
And then, sadly, there's a lot of pilferage. If you're not there watching everything come out, go back in again, some of it doesn't go back in again.
Sure.
The person representing you is only one pair of eyes, and there's half a dozen people moving stuff in and out. So you have to be very alert and make sure everything goes back in.
Yeah, just, editorial comment. I think bureaucracy anywhere in the world sucks. It's certainly true here in Ecuador. And aduana, which is like the customs, they're known here by everyone to be like the worst. So, certainly I can imagine that being quite a hassle. I deal with the bureaucracy here all the time. It's a hassle in general. It gets a little worse every year as they come up with new rules and new laws and new procedures. And, aduana has the reputation of being maybe the worst of them all. So I can certainly, I haven't dealt with a shipping container personally. I've just recommended clients to you and so forth. But I can certainly imagine that being quite a trail of paperwork and red tape. And a lot of times, I don't know what your experience has been with this. A lot of times in Ecuador, and it's not as common as it is in some other places. In general here, if you're making a list of the worst bureaucracies to the best bureaucracies in the world, this actually wouldn't be that bad here. But that being said, people will take bribes generally. Do you get people in customs giving you a hard time because they want money specifically? Have you come across that? Yes,
no, it's bad news. I mean, some people were joking. One of my a competitor, I guess, regularly was paying bribes, and of course, when you're doing that, the price goes up and up.
Sure.
I had a situation last week. I mean, it's gone from hundreds of dollars to this one customs officer wanted $2,500 to turn a blind eye to a mistake.
Oh wow!
And then when she consulted her supervisor, it went up to $3,000.
Oh wow!
And I told the person to refuse, and obviously there's a concern that once you refuse to pay, they're going to do things to hold you up.
Right.
And, that container did get out without paying anybody any money. I tell people, I've had people pay without calling me first, and they still don't get their container out.
Yeah.
Paying money in Ecuador is not the way forward. It doesn't help. You may think it helps you, if you pay a bribe and it actually gets something done, but it's a very slippery slope, and I really feel strongly. I mean, in this country, and me even suggesting to somebody they should pay a bribe is for me, I'd lose my license.
Yeah.
There's no need to pay a bribe. If your packing list is good and you are polite and friendly, there is no reason why you can't get through the process. I actually got caught smuggling. I didn't smuggle. I was asked, when I came to Ecuador, I was asked if I could bring this car part with me. Not knowing, and I checked the customs site, I didn't see anything about car parts being not allowed. But anyway, we get to the airport and go through that X-ray machine, and the next thing I know is I'm hauled off to one side, and they're going through my case, pull out this auto pass, and the discussion started. They said this is not allowed, and I said, "Gee, I looked on your site, and I couldn't find it." And we stayed very friendly, and it took an hour and a half, but at the end of the hour and a half, they let me keep the auto pass, and I went on my way.
Yep.
I think, if you're polite and persuasive and keep smiling, that's a much better way forward than offering money.
Yes, and I'll just piggyback on that. That's just how everything works here. If you're polite, I mean, it's a different culture. Like, people in Ecuador, you're not really allowed to raise your voice and get upset here. And so that's really an offense. So if you get some foreigner who gets upset and starts, kind of getting out of line, that's not going to end well. But yeah, definitely being polite, and making friends as far as just, chatting, goes a long way here. I've had similar experiences with, situations like that where, it can take a long time, but, you maintain your cool and maintain your rapport with whoever you're dealing with, and you end up okay. I wanted to ask you, what are, and obviously people, you can send people these lists, people can find them online. I have a copy, I think, of what you sent me, but what are some of the things that you can't bring specifically to Ecuador, maybe some of the more important ones?
There's really, so long as it's for your personal use, it's a really easy list. It's firearms, munitions, pornography. A couple of the surprising ones are things like cosmetics. For some reason, they don't like. Again, in limited quantities, it's not a problem, but on the list, it's not allowed. They are very strict on clothing. You're allowed 200 kilograms of clothes, and those have to be listed by the individual that owns them, have to be the size of that individual. And again, it goes back to in the early days, people bringing in clothes for charity or friends
to sell,
or whatever.
Sure.
But they're very strict on clothes, and of course material to make clothes. You're limited to 5 meters of material. But the other way, it's amazing what they do allow if it's for your personal use. There's just about anything goes. That I had one couple who got in trouble because they had all their dress-up clothes. But 200 kilos is really a very good allowance. Most people do not have 200 kilos of clothes. And that includes, by the way, shoes, belts, hats, scarves, anything that goes on the body.
Okay. So, I mean, I know specifically cars you can't bring, right? I think you might have told...
Oh, sorry, yes, that's a huge one you can't bring. Anything with an engine and wheels, you can't bring. We had a lawnmower, a riding lawnmower cannot come. ATVs, anything that has an engine and wheels that you can sit on is not allowed. Returning Ecuadorians can bring them with a whole lot of restrictions on value and engine size, but gringos cannot bring them.
And for example, Stephen, if I wanted to buy and bring, a $50,000 3D printer, could I do that?
Yes, you can.
Great.
But only one.
Right. I can't.
Appliances and TVs, they limit. Again, we used to ship like 5 TVs in a container, and but they again worked out these were for other people.
Sure.
Even North Americans don't need 5 TVs in their house, especially in an Ecuador house.
Right.
So now they limit it to 3 TVs for a married couple and 2 TVs for a single person.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get away with also having a laptop and a screen for your computer, but it's something again they look at anything that is a large quantity or a high value. Your printer there, they would certainly look at the value and decide if you were just bringing it in for your personal use, or maybe you're going to use it for a business. And if you're going to use it for a business, then they'd tax you.
Oh, they would. Okay, because it's over the 35,000.
Yeah, well, yes, and it's over the 35,000 for the business. They absolutely zero in on anything of high value and anything of large quantities. Too many ceiling fans was one hurdle we got to. They look at how many ceiling fans can you possibly need in your own home.
Yeah.
Lights, the same thing. How many lights do you need to light up your house? So if you've got 60 LED lights on your list, that's going to be a problem when you get to Guayaquil.
So, do you ever? I mean, is there ever a situation where let's take the lights example. Let's say you've got 60 LED lights and they're giving you a hard time. Could you be there with the approved municipal approved design plans for your house and be like, look, 60 lights? I mean, is that sort of what you get into, trying to prove that no, for real, this is for me, not for anyone else, kind of thing?
Yes, you go along there with the plans of your house and show them where you're going to put the ceiling fans and where you're going to put the lights. And we had a surprising one recently where they suddenly said sinks weren't allowed.
Uh-huh.
And we're arguing that one at the moment because the rule clearly says you can bring in anything for the bathroom.
Yep. Okay, and that's currently what held up.
Yeah, well, they tax the thing.
Okay.
They let them go, but they tax them. I haven't even seen how much they taxed. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but there's a principle in terms of bathroom items are allowed and sinks are bathroom items, so they shouldn't be wanting to tax them. And the person didn't have a large quantity of them. It was obviously for the house they're building. So.
Yeah. So do you find people just kind of making up rules as they go?
Well, it's every country in the world. It's always down to the individual customs officer, and you can enter this country and have a problem with an individual customs officer giving you a hard time on stuff. But yes, I think a lot of it is back to this bribe issue. They've been, when they've given somebody a hard time and then a few $100 has been passed over. I think some of the hard times they're now giving, like these sinks, I think was a precursor to asking for money. It definitely didn't go in that direction.
Sure.
We just insisted the sinks were allowed and finally said, well, then give us a tax bill and we'll argue it afterwards. Because the last thing you need to do is hold up the container. At $100 a day.
Right.
But I think a lot of the stuff that's now happening is caused by these people that have been paying money.
Yep, understood. Okay, I think we've covered most of it. Anything else that we've left out that you want to share with people regarding the shipping specifically?
No, they can certainly, as you mentioned at the beginning, look at the blog and as I said at the beginning, I'm happy to help people. So they can go on my website, contact me, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Do you want to share with people your phone number or email now, Stephen?
Sure. My email is saron@ifeonline.com, and my business phone number is 941-322-9464, and my cell phone, which I don't want calls late at night, 941-321-8744.
Great.
And like I said, I'm always happy to answer questions if it helps people make the right decision.
Perfect. And it sounds like you've actually been here, huh? Have you spent some time in Ecuador?
Yeah, well, I had to come just because I'd shipped so many people down there. I had to see what it was all about. I've moved so much in my life. I've said to people, I never want to move again, and I'm very happy in Florida. But yes, I was impressed with Ecuador. I just had the one trip.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't spend long enough there. I rented a car in Guayaquil and drove up across the mountains up to Cotopaxi, and then along the mountains to Cuenca, and then back around. But no, the thing that impressed me most about Ecuador was the people.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a Spanish speaker, which would be another reason why I wouldn't move there, but I just found them incredibly friendly and incredibly helpful, even though I didn't, and my wife didn't speak the language.
Mm-hmm.
They took the effort to communicate. They drew pictures, made signs with their hands, whatever it took to communicate and be helpful. And, that's a really nice thing when the people in the country aren't sort of turning their back on you because they don't want to deal with this ignorant person who doesn't speak the language. They're so friendly and so helpful. If I was just looking at moving to Ecuador, that would be the factor that would push me to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree. The people here in general, all in all, are great. I think that is one of the good things about here. Okay, Stephen, we've actually gone almost an hour. I really, really appreciate your time coming on. I know you've been extremely helpful for people out there who are going to listen to this and are thinking about Ecuador, thinking about a shipping container. Obviously, they can contact you and get more information. So once again, I just very much appreciate the time and you coming on.
Good. No, thank you for having me, Jesse. It's been my pleasure.
Great. Enjoy your evening, Stephen.
And you, sir.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye. Okay, thanks for tuning in to episode, 35, I think? 35 of the Ecuador Insider Podcast. Once again, I'm Jesse Bayer, out of our offices in Loja, Ecuador. You can reach us on our toll-free line, 888-999-0948. Website, A as in Apple, B as in boy, Ecuador.com. And email is info@abecuador.com. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great day.